Hey guys, this is Eric Weingartner with Weingartner Racing. You had asked for it, and today you get it. I'm comparing small block Chevy heads from 23, 18, and 13 degrees, and even to an LS head. I will try to give you the rundown, and each one progresses to a little bit more aggressive as we go, and I'll try to give you some more information. So we'll go from left to right, and we'll explain what we have. This first one is my ported Dragon Slayer. These are a 23-degree head. It's a low port head, and it's 242 cc's. The next one up, this is an AFR. It is their 245. It's a 23-degree. It is a low port head. All right, the next one up. This is my Brodix 10X RI. It's a raised runner 23-degree head, but it's a really small one, and I've got a big one to show you in between. I just couldn't fit it on the bench. The next one after that is an 18C head. This is an 18-degree small block Chevy head. This is CNC'd from Brodix as well. And finally, for this part, there is a Brodix 13 head, which is a 13-degree head, and we'll be comparing them all. And also, I've got over here in the corner, this right down here, which doesn't look like that much. That's an LS7 we'll compare it to. So I'll put them all up here and we'll go through them. But I'm splicing this video together. I'm not a video editor, so bear with me as this all goes together. Hopefully it works out fine because I'll give you some explanation. Okay, for the first head, this is the Brodix Dragon Slayer. Now, this is from their catalog. This is the 2020. I don't have a 2021. This is what they claim this head flows stock. I'll go ahead and warn you, when I flow it on my bench, it went 292. So if you look at this at 600, it's supposed to be 302. It's about 10 CFM less on my bench. But anyway, this is how it starts. That's not how I finish it. So this is kind of what I use for this head that I'm about to show you, which is my ported one. I do slightly different stuff that I have them do for me that's different from what you order from them, and it helps with my porting. But anyway, so this is the first head, 23-degree, low port deal. This is how they end up. That's the flow numbers when they're done. Now what I'm going to try to do, because I'm trying to figure out this video editing software stuff, is I'm going to put a picture right after when I'm done talking about this head. But just to give you an idea, this is a 23-degree head. Now it's a low port, and it's standard valve spacing, which means the valves are just as they would be as from the factory designed them in 1950s. Matter of fact, actually, I think they're moved over a little bit. I think everybody did that Dart, and others like maybe 50,000s. But for the most part, you can consider it standard valve spacing. It's not altered dramatically. It's what it was back when Chevrolet designed them, and that's what it is. Okay, this one has a 210 by 1/600 valve. That's the biggest valve you can put in a standard valve spacing if you want to keep a 1.6 exhaust valve. Now, I've gone up to a 214 intake valve and a 1560 exhaust valve to make it fit in a standard valve spacing head. This one's not. It's a 210 by 1/600. Now, this head, as you can tell by the flow numbers, this one takes stud mount rockers, and we'll get to the differences with the other heads in a second, which means I can put a guide plate and a stud on here and it'll fit. These are called push rod slots, okay? These have not been moved from the factory. They're what they are from what Brodix machines them as. So if you actually got a Dragon Slayer, they'd be in the same spot. This is the limitation factor for small block heads. They can be moved over, but then require shaft rockers. This head does not require shaft rockers. This is what they flow. Now, this is just a regular, about as an ordinary head as you can get for 23-degree. Our next one up is the AFR. This is the AFR 245. Now, it's a step up, or I wouldn't say a step up, because I really think both my Dragon Slayer and this head are probably going to perform the same. This is my 242 cc's when I'm done porting mine. This one's 245 cc's. But the AFR does have some advantages as far as the architecture that makes it where it could outperform mine. Standard spacing without the shaft rockers. But we're just showing you what I mean by how it's different. First off, the way that this AFR is different from the regular Dragon Slayer of mine is that the valve spacing has changed. This one here from AFR is a 60-40 spacing. You'll see it on their website. What it means is from the standard valve spacing, they move the intake valve over 60 thousandths and the exhaust over 40. What that does is it allows you to run a bigger intake valve and with keeping the same 1.6 exhaust valve. So in this case, because it's standard, if I want to keep a 1.6 exhaust valve, the biggest intake valve I can run is 210. Because at this, that they move the spacing, you can run a 2.125 inch intake valve and keep the 1.6. Now this one's also different in this fact. My Dragon Slayer, you can run this 242 standard of mine. You can run stud mounts and you don't have to buy shaft rockers. One of the limitation factors I told you before is the push rod pinch. On the AFR 245, they moved the pinch out. They've widened it through here. So it's wider there. And because they moved this out here and here, if you tried to put a stud mount rocker on, the push rod would hit and it would never line up. So you have to run shaft mount rockers. And that adds to the cost, but it does give the head an architectural advantage because you can make the pinch in here bigger than you could with my standard 242 with a stud mount, because you're just limited. Now, of course, you can go higher to get area, but I'm just giving you some of the basics for this video. So that's the next step. Now, what's it flow? There it is. Now, if you notice, it actually flows less peak-wise than my 242. And also in some spots, well, for a good part of it, it's worse. It flows less than that head. But the reason why I say both of these will probably perform the same or close to it is because, well, I really think mine are still out edge it just barely. Now, if you get my one without the push rod pinch on my Dragon Slayers, it's probably better. But is the reason why that these are pretty close is because this has a bigger pinch than my standard one with the shaft rockers. So even though this one may flow a little bit less, the advantages of the bigger valve and the push rod pinch closes up the advantage that's lost in flow. But this is a 23 versus 18 degree head deal, and 13 degree, I'm just showing you some of the difference. Our next step up is, what if we took a 23 degree head, but raised the intake runner? What does it do? This is the raised runner 10X RI, and it's a special casting. If you order the regular 10X RI, it won't be raised up this much. I'll go ahead and warn you. But anyway, this is one of the ones I used for Engine Masters. As a matter of fact, this actually was on my Engine Masters engine. This is a 23 degree head, but it's got a little bit of differences. First off, this is a 40-60 spacing. If you remember when I talked about AFR, they were at 60-40. Brodix does a 40-60, which means they moved the intake valve over 40 from standard, but they moved the exhaust over 60. Anyway, the big thing that gives that advantage is, of course, you can run a bigger valve. The biggest valve you can run with this valve spacing is a 215 intake valve and a 1/600 exhaust valve. That's assuming you kept the 1/600 exhaust valve. Of course, if you shrink down the exhaust valve, you could run a bigger intake valve. But this is a 215 by 1/600. Now, I picked this head because it's actually pretty small. It looks huge, but this is really short. So this is less than 2 inches, by the way. Just to give you an idea, the camera makes it look like it's massive. It is wide, very wide. Anyway, it's the same cross-sectional area, or really close to the 18C head you're about to see and the 13 degree head you're about to see. So it's a good kind of comparison for you. Now, here's what it flows. Just give you an idea. Now, this head, it's raised up. So if I look at where the bottom of the port is compared to the deck, or where the ground would be, it's 0.954 from the bottom of the opening of the intake port to the deck would be 0.954. So that's a pretty good raised up. This is a really good raised runner head. There's another one that I don't have here for a 23 degree head. It's the All Pro. That is the baddest 23 degree raised runner head that there is. I don't have one here. I've done one. It flowed 383 if I remember correctly. It's a bad dude. The biggest reason for it is, for all the 23 degree heads you have, most of them are standard valve spacing. The Brodix 40-60, the AFR 60-40. When I start talking about the 18 degree stuff, the valve spacing changes dramatically, which allows you to put a humongous intake valve in it. The All Pro head has the valve spacing of an 18 degree head. It's got the opening of an 18 degree head, so it's further up. It's just a bad dude. Of course, it costs big money too. So anyway, these are comparing those two so far. So now you get an idea. You've got 23 degree, stud mount, 23 degree shaft mount, and then you have this raised runner one. Now this one, by the way, also does require shaft mounts, because you can look how wide it is. So it's like the next progression up. And for our next one, I'm going to show you one that I don't have a head of, but someone asked, so I'll show you. All right, almost. I'm going to wait for the next head. But this one is the same 23-degree heads, the raised runner one, but I forgot to show you this one. So sorry about I'm splicing these together, but I totally forgot this one. In case you're wondering, like, what's the baddest you can make that Brodix head? So far, this is it. And I haven't had a chance to go further. And just no one's really asked for it, because when you get to the price of this head, as far as the raised runner stuff, you're into the 13-degree money. So most people just don't do it. But to give you an idea, this port right here is what you just saw for the raised runner one. This is that same head, but I made it bigger. So you could tell it's much larger. So in that case, now it's 0.721 off the deck. So from here to here is 0.721. It's still got the same size intake valve, and I haven't really had a chance to play with it to make the intake valve bigger. I'd have to shrink the exhaust to do it, but that's what it flows. So it's not the greatest. Haven't worked on it in like 4 years, but it's not bad. In other words, it's 365 CFM, you know, out of a 23-degree head. It doesn't cost near as much as the All Pro, but I just thought I'd show you that one. Now to the next. All right, head. Someone had asked me about this 18X head, if I'd ever done it. So this is from the Brodix catalog, in case you're wondering. And I don't have this head. I've done a head, but I thought I'd show you. This is an 18X head. That's what it's called. Brodix makes it. What makes this different from the other heads, as far as 18-degree stuff, is it's a 40-60 spacing, which means it's the same valve spacing as that last head I've showed you, both the raised runner ones. So you can run up to a 215 by 1600 exhaust valve. Have I done one? Yes, this is what they have. So here's what it flowed stock. If you look, it's really not that good. Now you might say, I thought it was an 18-degree head. Yes, but because it's 40-60, the idea with this head was you could still run a stud mount rocker. You don't have to buy shaft rockers. So that was one thing they thought, well, we'll save customers money if they just buy, they don't have to buy shaft rockers. It saves them like $1,600, and you can run an 18-degree head, and this would be it. That was the idea of it, but because of it, it limited its functions. So stock, it flows this, not very good. I went ahead and ported it, and after porting, it's not bad. So I mean, you look at 600 number, you look at 340 CFM. That's a pretty stout number there. How does that compare to the other ones? Not as good as a regular 18-degree head, but this kind of gives you an idea. Now to the real 18-degree head. Before I show you the 18-degree head, maybe I should probably explain what I mean by degree. Let's pretend that this is the valve inside the head. The distance, and remember, this would be 0 degree. If this was the deck of the engine itself, this would be 0 degree valve angle. You could think of it like a 23 degrees, more like this. Of course, it's not. But as you go to 18, it moves this way. It gets closer to the deck, and then so on and so forth. So like 23, 18, 13. In other words, the valve's moving this way. Because it does that, you get some pretty good advantages. One of them is, as it comes this way, the chamber itself will start getting smaller because it's getting closer to the deck, so the chamber size will go down. So you can think of an average 23-degree head has a combustion chamber of 64 cc's. An 18-degree will have one in the 50s, and the 13-degree one has a 47. And the reason why is because the valve keeps moving down, so the chamber size itself gets smaller. There's some advantages and disadvantages of that, but I thought I'd explain that before I show the actual 18-degree head so you can kind of get an idea. The other thing to note is you can't just put an 18-degree in a standard port head, because if you look at the way the valve tilts, so the port's going to tilt that way. So if I have an 18-degree head, that port's really it's taller this way, so it's coming up. So the intake port opening has to keep rising. If you notice on some of the Ford heads, not that anybody watching a small block Chevy has ever paid attention to Ford head stuff, they have a 20-degree valve angle, but then some people have put like a 11-degree with the stock opening. So in other words, they tilted the valve really this way, but the port opening's still the same height. So now it has to make a gigantic turn to get back over. So ideally, when you lower the valve angle, you raise the opening so that you get more of a shot in there like it's supposed to be. Hope that kind of can still sum it up. Now to show you. This is the 18C head. So in case you're looking at the Brodix catalog, you're like wondering what it is. That's this. This is what they claim it flows. The port size is really tiny, and that's what this one is. So here we are. Now I measured from the deck. See that they leave a gap here. That a lot of the 18 and 13 degree heads do that. But from the bottom of the opening on the intake port to the deck is 1.293. And this is what it flowed. It's not as high as what you would think. If you notice, the last one I showed you, the 18X, well, the 18X actually outflowed this one. But in all fairness, that was after I ported it, and it's actually a bigger port than this one is. Now, I am going to port this one, and it'll probably crack 400 CFM. Now, something to note is these 18-degree heads, this one, just as they are from the Brodix, they are a 218 by 1625 valve. So what that means is it's got a really large exhaust valve, and it could have had a bigger intake valve. Now, if you look at Brodix right here, it tells you the valve spacing on them. It's a 58-107, which means in this case, it moved it 58 thousandths this way and 107 thousandths on the exhaust away. So that you could tell the valve spacing's dramatically changed. What other differences are there between an 18 and 23 besides the flow? You also cannot run stud mounts. So the 18X allowed you to run a stud mount. This one, you have to run shaft rockers because the push rod pinch is moved over. You notice that. It also takes a different intake manifold because the face where they grind these, it's a different angle than it is for 23 degrees. So if you try putting a 23 degree valve intake manifold on here, besides the bolt holes not at all lining up, it won't fit anyway. It's a wrong angle. So you're looking at an extra cost. You have to have shaft rockers, have to have a different intake manifold, and here's the other one. That's the exhaust ports. This is a stall pattern. Now, some 23 degree heads do have a stall pattern, and you can order any of my heads with the stall pattern if you want. But this is also a spread port where the exhausts are actually spread apart. Some 23 degree heads are this way, but if you don't have this already, you're gonna have to buy a whole new set of headers. And a lot of them don't make a shelf header to fit most chassis for a spread port exhaust, which means custom headers. Anyway, that's this head. Not bad, works really good. I will end up porting this, but I just thought I'd show you what that one is. Now to the 13 degree. Psych! I forgot to show you one other thing. There's one other head that Brodix sells that's not in their catalog. So if I'm looking at this in the 2020 catalog, it goes from 18C and right to the dash 13, which is the next head I'll show you. But you could still order this head, and it's insanely expensive. For an 18 degree head, it's insanely expensive. This is their 10X AP. It was designed by WeldTech. I'll try to include some pictures to go with it after this one. It's the best flowing head for an 18 degree one, but it's not at all for drag racing. So it flows really well, but they have weird flow stuff in it, like a huge lump in the center of the port and a long wing. It kind of helps with the flow. This is what they flow. So you can tell it flows better than 18C, but it's more designed for circle track. It's not that it wouldn't run well drag racing, but it's just not what you would hope. But anyway, that's what its intake port flows. I didn't flow the exhaust. So I will attach pictures if I can figure it out, but I thought I'd show you that one. This is the 13 degree head. So this is the Brodix Dash 13, in case you're wondering what it looks like. That's it in the book. And this is what it claims it flows, like 370. This is actually what I got from it. This is the stock numbers right there, and that's the stock exhaust. In case you're wondering what potential it has, this is one of them. This is not the best one I've done. This is after porting and a bigger valve. Okay, so here you are. Now this one, because it's a 13 degree, they also realize you have to raise up the intake port. So the intake port from here to the deck is 1.674. So it's raised up more. Now this one has the same intake valve size as the 13 degree, or as the 18 degree you just saw, as a 218 by 1625. Again, as you could tell, the flow numbers, you're looking at this one for stock. It's better than the 18C that you'd saw before, but you're not like, wow, that's outstanding. I thought it'd be 400 CFM. It turns into that when you put a bigger intake valve and short strength exhaust. So this is with a 220 by 1600 and also porting to make it larger. These heads, even though they're like, wow, 13 degree stuff, they should be big. It seems confusing because, like, I want to say this one is I'm gonna look here at the same time. I think it's 285 cc's. I should point out too, if you look at the valve center line, because they move it even more. So it's 85 over this way and 134 over this way. So it gives you much more room for a bigger valve than this, than even in the 18 degree head. But even though it's 285 cc's, it kind of confuses people because this port is way longer than the 23-degree head we started off with. So this is close to 6 inches long compared to the 23-degree one we first started with. It's like 5.4. So it's almost a ½ inch longer, and that ½ inch takes up volume. So that gives you an idea. Now also the chamber shrinks too. So this one's down to 47 cc's, really small. The weird part about this head itself is if you order it from Brodix, or you order it from me, the head itself is not that much more than, say, the AFR 245. Will get you as the extra stuff. So just like the 18, you have to run shaft rockers. Can't run them because, again, the pinch is moved over, so shaft rocker is required. Again, the intake manifold becomes an issue because you can't run a standard one. Your intake manifold options are also limited on this one. There's just not a whole lot out there. So it used to be more, but Brodix stopped making some of them. Next thing is the headers. Now, if you look at this one, it's got the stall like the 13-degree did, but this is called the 18-degree pattern. So it's like, well, no, it looks like the regular small block Chevy. It's not. This is way wider. So you got to get custom headers as well. But I instruct most of my customers that if you're going to go 18-degree, just skip it, go to 13, because the price from this head to the 18-degree head is probably not even $100 off the top of my head. And you still have to have the same stuff. Still have to have shaft rockers. You still have to have a special manifold. You still have to have the custom headers if you don't already have them. And you're going to buy pistons anyway, so this is what you should probably go with. It's got more capability, and you're like, how is that possible? One, the valve spacing is better. Two, because the port's raised up more, it gives a lot more opportunity for airflow to have a straighter sight to the valve. And the chamber itself is usually smaller, which helps out in NA stuff. You're like, well, what about power header? That's what this one's actually going on. You can have these heads, and I haven't done them yet and haven't sent off, where they do a conical cut where they'll CNC soften them. That means they'll dig a curve out this way. It makes it almost a dish before the chamber and helps it with power adder stuff. So that's it as far as those go. Now, one of the questions is everybody thinks LSs are better. Let's look at a stock LS7 and how does it compare to this head. This is a stock LS7 GM head. Now it's CNC ported before someone says, oh, it's not the same comparison because they're not CNC ported. So what I'm really doing is I'm comparing the small block Chevy with the LS at this point. This is what the head flows. If you're noticing, it's not even in the same ballpark as far as flow wise in some areas as the 13-degree head. So in some spots it's better, definitely at 6. I mean, you look at 6, that's a pretty stout number. The one thing is this has a much bigger intake valve. You look at 220 intake and a 1615 exhaust. So from the factory, it has a really big intake valve, which gives it a huge advantage. However, if you look at its flow, it hits 361 and then dies. If you look at the 13-degree, and I'll put them all up together, that 13-degree it's for sure better on the exhaust everywhere. The intake port, I think the only spots that really beats it maybe is that, and I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, so I could be wrong when I post these, between 5 and 6. I definitely know not there. So from deck to the start of the opening of the intake port, you're at 1.724. And if I'm looking at my 13-degree head real quick as I do that, it was 1.674. So this one's raised up even higher. So this is actually more raised up than even our 13-degree stuff, which is, there's no doubt that the LS7 head here has more potential than the 13-degree just because big intake valve, taller raised up port should be. But here's the thing, this is a stock GM casting. So what that means is I can't get as crazy as I could say with a 13-degree because in aftermarket stuff, you've got, they leave things more beefy and I got the waters out of the way so I can grind pretty good. I'm fairly certain that if I got really crazy with this one, I'm gonna hit water. It's just nature of the beast with that cast iron or casting from the factory. But anyway, there's your comparison. How they flow, what's the differences? There you go. Long video, a lot of heads. There you go.